Hey guys, Eternal7 here. Today I'm just going to be making a video about my thoughts on the Dark Tower series by Stephen King that I finished last week. Bit of a delayed video, but here I am now, finally making it. Now, before I get to the main topic of this video, I just would like to say that I am a huge Stephen King fan. He's one of my favorite authors of all time. I first discovered his bibliography in the summer of 2023. Well, I knew about him, for a really long time, but the first book I read by him was Salem's Lot in June of that year of 2023. And I absolutely fell in love with just the graphic and just the great detail, just the scope that he used. There was so much character, so much just multi-dimensional storytelling that just made me absolutely fall in love with him and as an author. And then I read It by him soon after, and I mean that book was even more amazing. Just a little long, yes, could have been a little shorter, but just truly fantastic. Again, had a huge scope to it, super epic. Just the Loser Club, seeing them like 27 years later, it was just an absolutely incredible experience. And then you have the other Stephen King books I absolutely love, like The Shining, what else, 11/22/63, my personal favorite, The Green Mile, Pet Cemetery, The Stand, one of the most epic books I've ever read. Stephen King is truly a mastermind, and the Dark Tower series is no exception. However, there are some mixed thoughts that I do have about the series and all 7 books as a whole. And I didn't read Win Through the Keyhole. I know there's like a 4.5, but I haven't gotten around to that yet. Maybe I will sometime soon, but these are just my opinions on like the 7 main books, that were written between 1982 and 2004. Now, to start out with my thoughts on the first book, I thought it was just pretty decent and nothing more. And I know a lot of, even Dark Tower fans kind of saw the first book as a weak start. It had a good story, it had interesting, set of characters and stuff and a really cool location. I love the desert theme and everything. However, overall, it just wasn't really the most captivating. It was also a little underwhelming too, with its very short length being about 250 pages, and there wasn't quite a lot. And by the first book, I wasn't super gripped into the series, and I wasn't sure if I was going to continue on with it. And then, I started watching a lot of videos that you said, you got to read the second one, you got to read Drawing of the Three. That's when it really picks up. That's when it gets really good. So a few weeks later, I borrowed the Drawing of the Three from my local library, and it was a pretty solid book. It introduced more characters. It really expanded upon the world. It gave a little more length to the story. Just it did more for the series, and I could see that this was going in a really good direction. So of course I read the third one next, The Wastelands, and The Wastelands is probably my favorite in the series as a whole. It's the perfect length. It's about 500 pages long, roughly, but it doesn't feel too overly bloated, Each page has enough action that is justified for its worth, the way it begins and the way it ends. And I'm going to put a spoiler. I'll skip to here if you want to avoid it. But, well, first of all, it starts out with the cadet fighting a mechanical bear. And then it ends with a suicide train trying to kill itself. I mean, come on, like, you got to be crazy to think of that. Probably the aftermath of drugs, most likely, but absolutely incredible. One of my favorite books by Stephen King, probably my top 10, but it kind of went down after that. Of course, I was really excited for Wizard and Glass because, Wastelands was so good. However, that book was severely flawed. Now, I knew a lot of people had mixed feelings about it, but even then I wanted to go into it with a very open mindset. I'm like, it could still be good. It's Dark Tower after all. It's got Stephen King's amazing writing, but once I actually started reading it, even though it was good for the first 100 pages, once Roland stopped to tell his 700-page backstory, it got really dull and really slow, and I just kind of stopped caring about what was going on in the whole Dark Tower realm. Now, I'm sure there are good things about it. I just kind of glossed over a lot of that, possibly. I may give it a reread, but overall, Wizard and Glass just didn't resonate with me like it did for some others. And this was back in the January of 2024 when I read Wizard and Glass. So it was a bit of a while till I read another one. It wasn't until October, around the beginning of October, when I read Wolves of the Kala, which was also about the same length, maybe a little bit shorter. And I was a bit concerned because, again, I liked, like the 500-page Dark Tower, but once it starts really expanding, that's when it gets a little too much. And while Wolves of the Kala was a little bit better, and I feel like it did serve more of a purpose in the Dark Tower series, it still kind of underwhelmed me because it went on too long. Now, I do really like Father Callahan's story and, his part in it. I thought that was really cool. But for the most part, it was just kind of a decent book and nothing more. And then a month later in November, somewhere mid-November, on hold, I got Song of Susanna and the final book to complete this, whole Dark Tower journey. My thoughts were a bit mixed on it, and I was a little bit concerned, especially because the last book was like just as long as Wizard and Glass and Wolves of the Kala. But I still went to it with an open mind. Song of Susanna, I will admit, was pretty underwhelming in my opinion. It kind of just felt like a pit stop to the last book, really. I mean, it almost kind of didn't even really need to exist. It could have been like the part of like Song of Susanna could have been like shortened by 200 pages, and it could have been like a couple 100-page section in the last book, but instead it was just drawn out into an entire novel, and I just thought it was really unnecessary. However, when I was almost kind of losing hope on the Dark Tower, I finally read the last book, and I'm so glad to say that my thoughts on this series has just completely went through the roof. I absolutely loved the last Dark Tower book. It is so close to the Wastelands as being my favorite in the entire series. Just the scope of it all. It takes everything that was so great and just puts it into this one epic masterpiece of just storytelling. Every page, has something to it. There's always action. There's never a slowdown in the speed of, of how he gets this point across, and just the ending too, I mean, I don't want to spoil it, but I mean, come on, it's just incredible. Absolutely loved it. 5 stars, 100%. Probably the best book that I read back in November. And yeah, so that was just my thoughts on the Dark Tower series. It's a little hard to explain it as a whole because there's so many layers to it. There's some books that I really like. There's some books I don't really care for. However, I think the good books are really strong, and they really do elevate the series. So I think as a whole, I can say that The Dark Tower is a great book series with a lot of creativity, a lot of ingenuity, and yeah. So this was just a video just explaining, my thoughts on the series, after reading all the 7 books. Some overloadedness, some dragging out through some of the stories. But overall, I really enjoyed my time reading these books. And yeah, if you haven't checked them out, I think it'd be worth a shot, especially if you're a Stephen King fan. But yeah, anyway, guys, thanks for watching, and yeah, peace.